We're good? We're good. All right. So it was definitely more than 10 years ago. Probably 2008-ish, 9-ish, 10, 12 years ago or so. I was at a church camp, probably about this time of year in June. And I sat down and I talked to a minister. And I don't remember his name, so I'm going to call him Jesse because every Jesse I've ever known has been cool, like Jesse James, you know, Jesse from Full House. Honestly, what happened was I was watching a baseball game while it was on in the background, and this guy on the Reds is named Jesse, and he had a good game. So I was like, Jesse. But then I was like, I needed a name, so it's Jesse. His name is Jesse. Cool. I don't remember his real name, but it's Jesse. So I was talking to Jesse, and Jesse was talking about his plan for what he wanted his ministry to look like. And he talked about what he was really passionate was this group of villages in China. Okay. And he was talking about these villages. He was talking about all of that. And he was talking about, what made them, his passion. And he had a lot of different reasons, but really the biggest reason was that this was a group of people who did not have a written language. And that creates problems for Christianity because, our entire faith is largely based on a, set of written scriptures. And because of that, these people in China had never heard about Jesus. And so this guy who's, he just says, man, it just really was on his heart. And, he used, if you guys have ever listened to ministers and missionaries, ministers who aren't me, and missionaries talk about Jesus, there's always somebody, God's always putting things on their heart. And so God had really put it on his heart that these people they needed him to tell them about Jesus. And so he had come up with a plan for these Chinese people who lived in these little villages in the mountains of China to share the gospel with them. So this was his plan, okay? What he was going to do first was he was going to move to China, which was obviously going to be less than legal. China is, you don't just go to China and be like, hey, I'd like to evangelize your people. And they're like, come on in. So he needed, there was a whole plan of how to get in the country. And then he was going to get into the country. And then he was going to, move to the place. And he was going to spend enough time with these people that he was going to learn their spoken language. So he was going to learn the language they would speak with each other. Then what he was going to do is he was going to learn it so well, he could do more than just communicate with the people. He was going to create that from that spoken language, he was going to create a written language. Okay? And then he was going to teach them to read this written language. So he's going to go to China. He's going to live there. He's going to learn their spoken language. He's going to create from their spoken language a written language. He's going to teach the people to read this written language. Then that's all just a precursor to the part of the plan that takes a long time. Now that they can read this language, and now that this language exists because he's going to make it up, he's going to translate the New Testament from, Greek to their language. So he then, now they can read the New Testament with them and tell them about Jesus. This plan, if it works, somewhere between 30 and 40 years, that should be a good thing for them. So I'm sitting there at this church camp, and he's talking about this. I don't remember his name, like I said, but I do remember how I felt about what he was talking about. And I was just amazed. I was just completely blown away. This is one of the most amazing things I've ever heard in my life. And I'm sarcastic so often, especially when talking about church stuff, that I feel like sometimes I can't communicate that. I was genuinely impressed and amazed. I thought this is the craziest, this is the most amazing thing. You're going to give, 40 years of your life, basically your whole adult life, to, living illegally in another country to try to give these people, a Bible so that way you can share Jesus with them. And I told them how amazing it was. And then I said, but dude, I got one question. What if they're just not into Christianity? For real, what if after 40 years, you've given them a Bible, you've written them a language, and you're like, hey, so let me tell you about Jesus. And they're just like, no, thanks. We have another religion instead. What if that happens? And I remember asking that question, and that's part of why I don't remember the guy's name is he never talked to me again. He didn't want to talk to me after I asked him that question. That was really a hurtful question, I think. I don't think he liked being, asking, well, what if I waste 40 years of my life? So we didn't talk after that. But I still, to this day, I think it's the most amazing thing. And it's been more than 10 years now. It's been more than 10 years now. Last I heard, he did it. Like, he and his family, they live in China, and he is Operation Share the Gospel with these people after I write them a language and translate the Bible for them. Hopefully in 40 years they accept it. Plan. So I share this with you this morning because I think that's an extreme example, but I think that we think that's what ministry is. I think if you ask most Christian people, what is ministry? Describe ministry. Describe, people who are doing what God wants. Describe, people who are changing the world. Describe people who are, whatever. I think that we think that's ministry. Like, we think ministry is sitting down and saying, I'm passionate about X, and then I'm going to formulate a plan for Y, and then I'm going to carry out that plan, and my end result will be Z. I think that we think that ministry revolves around people doing crazy things, people doing amazing, giant, massive things. We think of ministers as like these impressive people who like went to school and, have degrees and can translate ancient languages and people that are like, yeah, I will totally illegally sneak into China and spend 4 decades there as part of my ministry. Like, I think that we think, when we think about ministry, that's what that is. And I think that we think that normal people, we can pray for those people. Like, we can pray for ministry. We can give money to ministry. But we think like that's what ministry is. And to be fair, this is the kind of stuff you read about in the Bible. I mean, like, it's in the Bible, like the book of Acts. They have like pretty distinct plans, and they go to different places, and it's all pretty organized, at least somewhat organized, and they do amazing things. And we think, okay, well, that's what ministry is, because that's what happens in the Bible. And Jesus sends out these disciples and sends these guys out, and they have a plan, and it's this whole thing. So I see why we think that, and I see, in church history, that's sort of been it. Like, you think about, some of the big, amazing, moments in our faith's history were people doing big, amazing things, that they planned and they chose. And I think, obviously, again, Jesse going to China is an extreme case of this. But I think that for the most part, if you were to kind of ask yourself, okay, what is it that ministry is? We think that ministry is making those sorts of choices and living that sort of life. And as it turns out, I don't think it is. I mean, like, okay, yes, obviously Jesse's doing ministry. Don't must say that's not it. But I don't think it's just that. And in fact, I don't think it's primarily that. And I think that because there's this, I don't think we think of it very often. I don't think that it's something we consider, but there's this strange theme in the stories that Jesus told in his parables. There's this really odd, sort of unexpected twist, this weird lesson that's taught over and over and over in his stories that I don't think hardly any of us have really stopped to consider. And one place we see that theme is in a story called the parable of the talents, which goes a little something like this. So one day Jesus is talking, and he says, hey, there was once a guy who was going on a journey. Now, in the story that Jesus is telling, we're not really told why the guy goes on a journey. We're not told why he's going to be gone a while, but we're not told if it's like a business trip. Like, he's a business guy, so like it could have been a business trip. It could have been something with his family. Like, he could have had like family responsibilities. Could have been like a really long vacation. He had the money for that too. So we don't know why he goes on a trip. But the story of the parable of the talents starts with a guy who chooses to go on a trip. And he says, well, I'm going to be on this trip. I'm going to be on this journey. I'm going to be gone for a while. But I didn't get rich not working. I didn't get rich not, having money floating out there and building up, more money. So he brings 3 of his most trusted servants to him. And he tells them what's going to happen. He says, okay, guys, I'm going to give you some money. I'm going to leave on this journey, and I'm going to entrust you guys that while I am on this journey, I'm going to have you guys make me more money. Now, he did it in the most fair way possible, okay? He knows his servants. He knows these people. He knows them really well. And so he says, I'm not going to give you just, random amounts of money. I'm going to give you money based on your talent, you're based on your ability, based on what you've shown me before, based on who I know who you are. I mean, you guys are the people that I trust the most, and I want to give you guys every opportunity to succeed. I don't want this to be something that is, a failure for you guys. I want you guys to succeed. So he goes to one guy and he says, okay, well, you are my most trusted guy. You are the servant that I have seen do the most. You are the servant that I have seen, just able to produce the most wealth for me. So I'm going to give you 5 bags of silver. And you can do anything you want with these 5 bags of silver, but what I expect is that when I come back, I have a return on my investment. So you give 5 bags of silver based on what I believe you're able to do. And he brings the second guy, and he says, okay, well, I'm going to give you 3 bags of silver. And I don't want you to feel bad. Look, I know you would just watch me give that guy 5. I know. But you know that you're not as good as that guy. So I don't think he said that. Probably. Well, maybe he was the boss. But, listen. These 3 bags of silver, this is what I think you can handle. I fully accept that you may do things different than that guy. I fully accept you may not, produce as much as this guy, but I do, I trust that you can be faithful with these 3 bags of silver. And then he brought a third guy and he says, okay, look, you're in the top 3, man. This is not an insult. But you're in the top 3. Think of all the other servants that aren't hanging out right now in front of me. You're better than all those guys, but look, yes, I'm only giving you 1 bag of silver. It's not an insult. You're still top 3, okay? There's no shame in bronze. So here's 1 bag of silver. You can do anything you want. I don't care. I just want a return on my investment. And so the man gives out these 8 bags of silver to these 3 servants, and he goes on his trip. And he's gone for, a while. When he comes back, the first thing he wants to know is what happened with his silver. Again, he's a wealthy businessman. He did not become a wealthy businessman by not making money, even if he's not around. So he brings the servants together and he says, "Hey, I just want to see what you guys did." And just like before, he brings them all forward and he brings the first guy and he says, "Hey, man, what'd you do while I was gone?" And the guy with the 5 big bags of silver says, "Hey, man, look, this is awesome. While you were gone, I took your 5 bags of silver, and I made you 5 more bags of silver. You've doubled your investment. Now you have 10 bags of silver with me." And he brings it in wheelbarrows because there's a lot of silver, right? And he says, "That's what I did for you." And the master was amazed. He's like, "Oh, well done. You are a good and you are a faithful servant." He says, "You have shown that you are responsible. And so I'll tell you what, in the future, I'm going to give you even more responsibility because you have proven to me that you can be trusted. But right now, I'll tell you what's going to happen. We are having this massive celebration, and you're going to be a guest of honor at that celebration." And the servant, he was just super happy. And the master was super happy because he had, 10 bags of silver now. So then he brings the next guy in the room, the next guy, the guy with the 3 bags of silver. He says, "Hey, man, what'd you do while I was gone? What happened?" And the guy with 3 bags of silver says, "Hey, listen, so I know, you said I wasn't as good as the other guy. Even if you didn't say it, with your mouth, you said it with your eyes. I get it. But I have taken your 3 bags of silver, and I have made 3 more bags of silver, which means you've doubled your investment, and here are just 6 bags of silver. And since the first guy brought him in a wheelbarrow, so am I. Here's my wheelbarrows of the silver, because I want to look just as impressive." And here's the thing. The master was just as excited with the second guy with the first guy because, see, it wasn't actually about the amount of money. It was about the return on his investment. It was about these guys doing what they were supposed to do. And so he says, "Man, you are absolutely a good and faithful servant. You are just as good and just as faithful as the first guy. Everything is great. Look, in the future, you have proven that you are faithful and you are trustworthy. And so you've proven that. And so I will give you more responsibility in the future, but forget responsibility for right now because I'm throwing a massive celebration and you are going to be there as one of my guests of honor. And the second servant was, he was excited. Everything was great. And so that guy leaves, and the next guy comes in. And he says, this guy, hey, what did you do while I was gone? And this guy's answer is different. This guy says, well, listen, so, dude, do you know that you're really scary? That's how he starts. He's like, how terrifying you are. Like you are, it seems like you just seem to miraculously make money and no one disappoints you and there's just so much pressure. So you left and I sort of freaked out. So what I did was I took your bag of silver and I dug a hole in my backyard and I put the silver in the backyard. And when I heard you were coming back, I got my shovel and I dug it back up. And so, I'm really sorry that the silver is covered in dirt and so are my hands. But, here's your silver back. And that didn't go so well. And so the master said, man, you are lazy. That's wicked, man. He says, look, so you're scared of me, right? You know what you could have done if you were really scared? The simplest thing. You could have put the money in the bank and then drawn interest on it. Like a bank is the same as your backyard, except your backyard has no interest. Like you didn't have to double the money. Those guys did, but you don't have to be those guys. There was never any pressure for you to do anything other than make some sort of attempt to do the thing I told you to do. And you made no attempt to do anything at all. You've not been trustworthy. You've not been faithful. And so he ended up taking the money from that guy, and he gives it to the first guy. He's like, well, that guy was faithful and responsible, so I'm going to give him his money because that guy's going to be responsible with it. And he says, look, that celebration I'm having, you're not invited. And he has the guy thrown out, and he says, it's a little complicated conversation for an entirely different sermon, but it says that he went to the outer darkness where there's weeping and gnashing of teeth, which is really just a fancy old-timey Jewish way of saying he lived in regret and guilt and shame. And so it was a good, happy ending for two guys and not a good ending at all. Really the worst ending that you can have with you talk about ancient old Jewish ways of looking at things. Now there's a lot of lessons we could derive from this story. A lot of lessons. But here's the lesson we need to talk about this morning. When you think about the way this story is structured, the three servants all have something in common other than being servants. And that's this. They didn't have a choice. They had choices in how they could respond, but this entire story is predicated by a businessman saying, I am going on a trip. And as it turns out, the businessman did not consult with the servants about whether he would go. Again, we don't know if the businessman went because of business or if he went because of his family or he went because of vacation, he went because of something else. We don't know. But what we do know is that when he decided that I'm going to leave, he didn't ask his servants, hey guys, is that cool with y'all? Are you good with that? Are you good with that? He also didn't consult with his servants if it was okay to give them money. He didn't bring them in and say, hey guys, do you want me to give you money? He didn't do that. He also doesn't bring them in and say, hey, I'm going to give you money. How much do you want? The entire setup for this entire dramatic story is predicated on a guy going on a trip, him calling his servants together to give them money, and then deciding how much money to give them based on his opinion of them. And none of that was their choice. The two servants who were faithful had no choice as to whether the master left on this journey, gave them money, or gave them the amount of money. The one who was unfaithful did not have any choice about whether his master left or gave him money or how much money. The entire setup for this story is out of the control of the people who end up being judged. There is a judgment in this story, and that judgment is enacted on people who had no choice on their circumstances. Now, they had a choice as to what to do with the circumstances, right? Because the first two guys, they do what they're told. They double the money. They do, they're faithful. They're good and faithful servants, right? The third guy says, I'm not into it. And that's really what was wrong with what he did. It's not that he buries the money that's a problem. It's that he lives his life as if he can control that which he cannot control. That's his problem. He looks at this situation and he says, well, that guy says I have to do this. That guy is doing this. That guy brought me this. And he says, nope, I'm not going to play the game. That is his sin. That's his mistake. He tries to make a choice about that which he has no choice. And it results in, regret and shame and guilt. The other people, the other two, they don't do that. They simply say, okay, this has been dumped on my lap. This has been brought to my feet. I didn't ask for my master to leave. I didn't ask for these bags of silver. I didn't ask for how many bags of silver. I didn't ask for any of that at all. But what I can do now is to do my best with the circumstance I have. The parable of the talents is a story about people looking at a life they cannot control and making choices, good and bad, as to what they will do with this life they don't control. Now, it's weird because I don't know that we really think about it that way. But once you see that, it's sort of one of those things you can't unsee. Because you start realizing this is a theme in most of Jesus' teaching. For example, the story we've been talking about for the last, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, last 3 weeks? The most famous story that Jesus ever told, the parable of the Good Samaritan. We've been talking about the characters of the parable of the Good Samaritan that are not the Good Samaritan. And in full disclosure, the reason I'm preaching this sermon series, the reason I did this whole series, for me, the most compelling figure in this whole thing is a guy who, Jesus uses to teach this exact same lesson. Let's refresh our memory about what that story is. This is what we read in the Gospel according to Luke. This is the parable of the story of the Good Samaritan. It says, "The Jesus replied to the story, a Jewish man was traveling from Jerusalem down to Jericho, and he was attacked by bandits. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him up, they left him half dead beside the road. By chance, a priest came along, but when he saw a young man lying there, he crossed to the other side of the road and passed him by. A temple assistant walked over and looked at him lying there, but he also passed by on the other side. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey, took him to an inn, where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, 'Take care of this man. If his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I'm here.'" The end. That's the end of the story. Now, for just a second, I want you guys to put yourself in the shoes of the innkeeper of this story. Imagine it's Tuesday night, slow night. You're hanging out, don't know what's going on. You're hoping, man, I hope somebody comes in and rents some rooms, because that's how I make my living, and I like eating. And in comes a Samaritan, and over his shoulder, like a sack of potatoes, is a bleeding, naked, hastily bandaged man, smelling like olive oil and sweat and blood. He's got him over his shoulder, and the man is half dead. And the Samaritan says, "Hello, innkeeper. We're going to call you, not Jesse, we're going to call you Joey. We're going to call you Joey." And so he's like, "Hey, Joey, you're Joey now. Unless you want to be a lady. Jenny. You're going to be Jenny. We're going to make it Jenny. No, let's do Joey. I think it says it's a male. This is not the sermon. Joey." It feels like I have a moment like that all the time now. I'm losing my mind, guys. So your name is Joey, and you're on this inn, and this guy walks in, bleeding man over his shoulder. He's like, "Hey, Joey, innkeep, I need a room." And here's what you don't know. Anything. Like, you know nothing. You don't know about the bandits. You don't know about, like, what's going on with this guy. You don't know that, like, there was a priest that left him. You don't know that there was a temple assistant that left him. You don't know that this Samaritan has, bandaged him. For all you know, this Samaritan's the one who is, like, beating the guy to death. Like, you just don't know anything. All you see is a Samaritan, and you're not a Samaritan. And all you know is, so here's this, foreign guy. And then you've got the other guy, half dead, and he's just carrying him. And this just seems like a whole lot of mess you don't want a part of. And the guy comes in, he's like, hey, I need a room for the two of us. And every cell in your body is screaming, don't do that. Don't do that. And but it's Tuesday night. It's a slow night. And you do need the money. So you say, okay, you can have a room. Because here's what you figure. I mean, what's the worst going to happen? Like, okay, there's going to be a little bit of blood. That's fine. You're used to getting blood out of stuff. You're in an inn, after all. That's what you're going to do. Also, though, like, what's the worst going to happen? Like, it's going to be, like, one night, right? Surely? It's not like there's any chance this guy stays longer than, like, 12 hours. Because he's just going to come in and sleep and then leave the next day, right? Of course. And so, next morning, you wake up. And the guy comes to check out. And he's by himself. The Samaritan's by himself. And as then the Samaritan says, all right, here's the deal. I'm leaving, and you got to take care of that guy in that room. Now, here's what I need to understand. The text is very clear. He doesn't ask. So I want you to imagine that you own an inn. And in your inn, you are in charge. You do what you want. Joey gets what Joey wants in Joey's inn. Okay? That's it. That's the way it is. But this guy is giving you orders. He's saying, you're going to take care of this man. Even though you don't have the skill set for that, okay? Like, you run an inn. You're pretty good with the books, okay? Like, you're good at, like, changing sheets and getting blood out of stuff. I mean, you're good at cleaning stuff. Like, if old-timey, Old West movies have taught me anything, if you run an inn, you can make just a killer rabbit stew. But look, that's all you're good at. You are not a doctor. You are not a medical professional. You cannot keep a guy alive, right? Like, you don't know anything about bandaging anything. You got a half-dead guy in this room, and now you're being told take care of him. But don't worry, the guy's giving you money. The guy's giving you some money. And he's promised you that if the money runs out, that he'll pay you back later. And you know what, guys? In the history of the world, no one who has ever said, if the money runs out, I will pay you back, that person has never given you enough money for anything. If somebody says, oh, I'll pay you back if it's not enough, it's not enough. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. So now you got to pay out of your own till to give this guy money, right? Like, to keep this guy alive, which you don't know how to do. But don't worry. The best part of this is the guy's like, well, when I come back, which could not be more open-ended. Does he mean days, hours, weeks, months? Does he mean never? Because if you're the innkeeper, I promise you, you think he means never. I want you to imagine that this is the position that you have now been put in. And then the guy just leaves. And you know what I love about the story is, what's fascinating about the story is I have always, my whole life, like, I don't know when I first heard the story, I don't know. Probably when I was a really little kid in, like, children's church or something. But the first time I like this story, this is one of those stories like I don't know when I learned. It's just always been there, right? And in my head, I have always just assumed the innkeeper does it, right? Like, I just always assumed that the innkeeper is like, oh yeah, no problem, I can do that, no worries. And what I think is fascinating about this story is Jesus never says that. And I'm pretty sure when Jesus says things, he says them on purpose. And I think when Jesus doesn't say things, he doesn't say them on purpose. And I think Jesus purposely leaves this open-ended because the truth of the matter is this. That innkeeper is a stand-in in this story for the choices that we have. Is he going to throw the guy out on the street and let him die? It is 100% within his legal right to do so. 100%. Especially once the money runs out. He definitely has every legal right to just, boot that guy to the curb. Is that what he's going to do? Or is he going to give of himself? Sacrifice, money, and time. I don't know, find a book, learn how to read, figure out how to do doctor stuff, how does he even, think about, the burden this is for this man. Is that what he's going to do? You see, I always assume he does the right thing. But we can also easily assume that he doesn't, because it's totally open-ended. He's a character with a perpetual choice. And you see, here's why this is important. It's odd. Jesus keeps bringing these things up. The innkeeper did not choose to have this choice. He didn't choose for the guy to come to his inn. He doesn't choose for the Samaritan to bring this guy along. He doesn't choose the Samaritan to leave him in the room. He doesn't choose for the Samaritan to not give him enough money. He doesn't choose for the Samaritan to just leave. He didn't choose any of that. He's just trying to run an inn on now a Wednesday morning. All he's trying to do. And yet this is just dropped in his lap, foisted upon him. I don't know if that's the word. Foisted? Foisted upon him. Foisted is a entirely different word, I think. It's just foisted upon him, just brought there. It's a strange theme in Jesus' teaching. And I think the reason is because that's the way ministry usually is. You see, we don't think about that. We think about ministry as like Jesse going to China. I got a 40-year plan. I'm gonna write this language. I'm gonna translate the Bible. I'm gonna do all this stuff, right? That's what we think ministry is. But ministry is usually just living your life and then something happens and you didn't choose it at all. And it's just here. And now it's, well, what am I going to do? Ministry is usually just the guy's like, hey, or have some money, go do some stuff. And you can or can't. Ministry is just, hey, here's this guy, I need some help. Help him or not. It's constant. And it's the way that it is. Not just in small things or big things, or this is the way it is in all the things. I got time for one more story, I think. You see, because right after the parable of talents, Jesus talked about another one of his famous parables. And when you can probably guess it's going to have the same theme. It's the parable of the sheep and the goat judgment. It's about a king who comes back. Talks about he identifies himself as the king, but this king comes back and he separates the world into the sheep and the goats, the people who do good things for God and serve Christ, and those who don't. And both the sheep and the goats have an interesting question. Man, what are you talking about? We never saw you at all. We never saw anything. And this is what we read in the Gospel according to Matthew. One more time. It says, these righteous ones will reply, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you? Or thirsty and give you something to drink? Or a stranger and show you hospitality? Or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you in sick or in prison or visit you? And the king will say, I tell you the truth. What you did to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you are doing to me. The unrighteous will ask the same question, and it's the same answer. And the lesson here is very simple, that what we do to people who are in need, we are doing for Christ. What we refuse to do for people who are in need, we refuse to do for Christ, because Christ's image is imprinted on each and every single person, each and every person. And what we do for those in this world, we are doing for Christ. But look at that list of stuff. We don't choose people to be hungry. We don't choose people to be naked and in need of clothing, or homeless and in need. Look, none of us are we're not monsters, right? Like if you, like every person in the room, if you could say, okay, look, I can snap my fingers and nobody's ever hungry or homeless again. Every person in this room would say, yeah. How quick can I do that? We don't choose for people to suffer. We don't. But here's the deal. We weren't given the choice as to whether or not people will suffer. We weren't. Any more than the servants were given the choice about the master leaving on a journey or them getting money. Any more than the innkeeper had the Samaritan bring in the half dead guy. None of them had a choice. And we don't have a choice about people suffering. We also don't have a choice as to when we might meet people who are suffering. I mean, sure, okay, we can seek it out ourselves, but if you don't seek it out yourself, you're still going to encounter it. The choice we have is not whether or not these things will happen and whether or not we will encounter them. The choice we have is what will we do with that. Will we be those first two servants, or will we be the third? Will we be the innkeeper who helps, or the innkeeper who throws the guy on the street? Will we be the sheep? Will we be the goat? That's the choice we have. And we so often, guys, we will drive ourselves crazy in this world trying to control the things we can't control and getting that mixed up with the things that we can. We don't have a choice about the opportunities we're given. We just have a choice as to what we'll do with them. Ministry is just living life. And when things happen, and when we encounter needs, a life of ministry is deciding that I'll help those needs. Best of my ability. I may not be the 5 talent guy. I may not be the 3 talent guy. I may be like the quarter talent guy. But I'll do what I can. Jesse's awesome. I got no beef with Jesse. I think that's great. But we're not going to be Jesse. Like, I don't think any of y'all are going to a foreign country and writing a language anytime soon. I mean, maybe. I don't know, Mike. But we all live a life in which we are presented opportunities to help. Where we are presented opportunities to serve. Where we are presented opportunities to love. Like the innkeeper, like the servants, like the sheep. And that's the choice that we have. This morning, the musicians are going to come forward. Before that, though, I'm going to give the point to the sermon. We're in our 3rd week of our series called the Sidekicks, as we talk about the various characters in this whole thing. And this is our point this morning, the sermon in one sentence. We don't always choose what opportunities we're given to love others. What is our choice is if we actually will. We don't always choose what opportunities we're given to love others, but what is our choice is if we actually will. So now the musicians come forward. We're going to sing a song. We offer an invitation each and every week to take God up on his offer of just life, of being his people, of being people who know him, who love others, people who live eternal life. Jesus said it is eternal life to know him. And that's what we're trying to do, is to live out that quality of life each and every day. The all teaches that we to repent to be baptized. That sounds like 2 things. It's just one. To repent is to change our minds about the way life works, for us to say, I want to do things God's way. In baptism, we align ourselves with Christ. We go down in the water. It's like our old selves being put to death. We get out of the water. It's like our new selves being born again, just as Christ was. If you've never made the decision, we got a nice warm baptistry. We got all sorts of people who can do it. Let's talk. If you're already an immersed believer in Christ, we are not a perfect church, but we do serve a perfect God. We want to connect. We want to call. We want to cultivate. We want to meet new people. We want to share the gospel. We want to grow up while we do it. And we want to be people who understand that we're always given opportunities, whether or not we choose them, and that we want to take those opportunities to be faithful, to be an innkeeper who would actually do that, to be the sheep, and just to love others. As we stand,